So yesterday I had a really special experience that I was given permission to share. My husband and I, Baruch Hashem, brought two people to a chuppah, to having a Jewish under Torah, under God marriage. And it was really, really beautiful, very special, very moving. It was very, very, very almost like ethereal, just being under a chuppah that long, because I was under it twice. Now to have a chuppah, to have a Jewish wedding, privilege of first going to the mikveh, going to the ritual pool with all of the laws around that, very special experience. The Lubavitcher Rebbe actually says that anyone who goes to mikveh, the waters of mikveh that one goes to retroactively will heal children this woman had that were born without the spiritual benefits of mikveh. That every Jewish child should be born with the spiritual benefits of mikveh, but if a child was not, and then the woman goes to mikveh, retroactively this heals a child born without mikveh. So it's a very, very, very powerful experience. What Rivka is saying is true as well. It's an amazing gift of forgiveness. It's considered when you get married like you're starting a new life. In other words, the husband and the wife are like two parts of a soul that are coming together now. So since now they're coming together, it's like there's a new you, there's a new entity that never was before. The two of you becoming one through the chuppah. So maybe because I was influenced and inspired by that, and we're starting the 3 weeks. The 3 weeks are 3 weeks designated for, as we call it, semi-mourning over the destruction of the temple. We've had so far 2 temples, 2 semi-permanent homes for God. Should be permanent, but got destroyed twice. The first one lasted 410 years. It was destroyed on the 9th of Av. 70 years later, the Jews were able to rebuild a second temple, which lasted for 420 years and was destroyed. And that one's been destroyed for over 1900 years. And we're waiting and anticipating the now revelation of Mashiach, of the redemption, when we're going to have the third and ultimate and permanent temple that's not being destroyed because it's made by God. Man's going to have a part, but it's made by God. So it has the permanence that's not going to be destroyed. So the mourning for the destruction of the temple and all that destruction of the temple symbolizes, you could say destruction of a temple, I'm mourning for a building I never knew existed. And it existed 1900 years ago. A lot of other things have happened past 1900 years. I'm mourning for a building. But the temple signifies God's home in this world. And all the tragedy and pain that the Jewish people have experienced ever since this day, the 9th of Av, the day of the destruction of the temple twice, with the span of 490 years in between, the temple was twice destroyed on the same day. That day is the day of national suffering for any pain we've ever experienced, because any pain we've ever experienced is in essence a manifestation of this pain. Meaning when God destroyed his home, yes, the first time it was the Babylonians and the second time it was the Romans, but it was God, right? It was God. It's all God. Everything goes back to God. So when God destroyed his home because of our sins, this is opening up the gateway to everything that came after, to the exile, to the persecution, to the assimilation, to the tragedies, to the suffering, to the anti-Semitism. Everything we've experienced since is all really a manifestation of God's home being destroyed and God's presence not as experienced or in a sense exiled from this world, and our repentance and our service of God, bringing God back down to his home, bringing God back down to planet Earth, where of course that's the idea of redemption, Mashiach, when the entire world becomes once again God's garden, God's home, and God's temple is reestablished forever. So this day of national mourning for the destruction of God's home is a day of national mourning for all the pains we've ever experienced, because they're all a manifestation of that same exile of the divine presence because of our sins. Now, why specifically? What did we do that was a specific sins on record? Well, the first temple was destroyed for the 3 big sins. We think of the 3 most major sins. Do you know what they are? The biggest sins Jews could do would be, anyone know? Or could you guess? What would you think would be the worst sins?
Idolatry.
Idolatry. Yes, that's one of the three. We got one. Any thoughts on the other two?
Murder.
Murder. Yeah. That's one of the three.
Complaining in the desert.
No, we're talking about a sin that could happen at any time, like what we call the big three. Idolatry,
Okay.
murder, and what would be the other one?
Adultery.
Adultery. Yes, Manucha. I think Ina said something I couldn't catch, but yes, adultery. Idolatry, adultery, and murder are considered the three really, really big three sins, to such a degree that we're told that if we're ever in a situation where we're being told, well, do this or we'll kill you, you're never allowed to do this, no matter what the situation is, no matter what reason somebody would want to force you to do idolatry, adultery, or murder. Never, never, never. Considered like, in this, again, it's hard to qualify sins because in a sense, every sin is the same. Every sin is a disconnection from God. Every sin is just transgressing God's will. So whatever you might view as a very light sin or a very severe sin, it's all has a commonality of transgressing God's will. That's true. On the other hand, in a certain way, we do measure the weight of sins. And in certain situations, we would be told, if someone would say, do this or I'll kill you, in certain situations, we're allowed to do the transgression. Or if we're in a situation where, so to speak, we have no choice. In certain situations, we're allowed to do the transgression. It really depends on why the person is motivated to get us to do this or kill us. If it's a situation called, what's called shemad, which means a situation where the people around us, the non-Jews, are trying to uproot Judaism. And if they say anything to us, do this or I'll kill you, we're not allowed to do anything as long as there'll be a situation of 10 Jews who'll be aware of it. Even tying our shoes, not like how Jewish law dictates. Tie your shoe the wrong way or I'll kill you. Well, if they're doing this to uproot Judaism and there'd be 10 Jews that would know of it, we're not allowed to do that. We're supposed to die over tying our shoes. But if it's not a time when people are overtly trying to uproot Judaism, and it's rather what we're going to call situational, then for almost any transgression, we could transgress to save our life. Because God says, save your life, so then later you could serve me for long, good, healthy years, except for these three. These three, even if it has nothing to do with Judaism, person doesn't know you're Jewish, person doesn't care about Judaism, person doesn't know what Judaism means, nothing with Judaism. But idolatry, adultery, or murder, or they'll kill you, you're never allowed to do. You have to die rather than do any of those three. So we're told that the first temple was destroyed for those sins. Now, obviously, the people at the time of the first temple were very holy people, and maybe it was very, very few that did. I'm not going to get into the historical ramifications, but overarchingly, that's what we were told about the time of the first temple. And we were in exile for 70 years. And that 70-year exile cleansed us from these evils, and we're able to go back to Israel and rebuild the temple and have 420 more years in Israel with a temple. The second temple was not destroyed for idolatry, adultery, or murder. That wasn't our problem. We had a different problem. Do you know what the problem was?
Baseless hatred.
Baseless hatred. The second temple was destroyed because of how people treated each other, because of people not being respectful and kind and thoughtful and loving toward each other. And because of that lack of love for each other and everything that should be engendered because of that love, the second temple was destroyed. And we've been in exile over 1900 years, which means that effect has lingered for 1900 years. For 1900 years, we weren't able to wipe away that sin, the sin of idolatry, adultery, and murder, 70 years of exile, and we were clean. The sin of baseless hatred. Baseless hatred means no justification. You just take up space, and you're taking up space threatens my space, and therefore I hate you for that. So for that sin, 1900 years, and we didn't fix it. Now, the Lubavitcher Rebbe said, at this point, we have fixed it. And now we're supposed to focus on, in contrast to baseless hatred, baseless love. The same baseless hatred means hating for no reason. Baseless love means loving for no reason. I think Jonathan Sacks had a very beautiful line. He was the chief rabbi of England and very gifted speaker. And I think he said something like, the same way the Nazis pursued any Jew they could from an absolute irrational hatred, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, with his followers, is searching for every Jew they can find with this totally irrational, all-consuming love. What the Nazis did with hatred, we're doing with love, to find and to pull out every single Jew. So this baseless love means loving you, you don't have to deserve it. It doesn't have to be, well, you should get the love because. That's not baseless love. That's love for a reason. Just like baseless hatred, if I can explain it, it's not baseless. Of course, once I have baseless hatred, I'm going to make up an excuse. Just like anti-Semites. They have baseless hatred for Jews, and then they make up excuses. But the excuses fly, from one end to the other, depending on what they don't like. So it's not really such valid excuses, but it doesn't have to be, because in essence, it's coming from baseless hatred. So we combat baseless hatred with baseless love. And therefore, these 3 weeks, starting from this Thursday begins the period of 3 weeks. The reason why this Thursday begins it actually goes back not to the destruction of the second temple, but the destruction of the first. As I said, the first and second temple were destroyed on the same date, the 9th of Av, which is in almost a little over 3 weeks. By the first temple, the Babylonians came and laid siege to Jerusalem. They laid the siege on the 10th of the Jewish month of Teves, which is usually about January time. The city was under siege for 3.5 years. After 3.5 years, the city fell, meaning the Babylonians were able to breach the walls of the city. That was after a 3.5 year siege. If you can imagine the starvation that was rampant in Jerusalem, when for 3.5 years the city was in siege. Again, this is by the time of the first temple. When the Babylonians breached the walls, it was the 17th of Tammuz, which on our calendar this year will be Thursday. From when they entered into the city, when they breached the walls on the 17th of Tammuz, it took them 3 weeks until they were able to set fire to the temple, because for those 3 weeks, every Jew alive in the city was doing anything they could to forestall this advance, throwing their bodies at the Babylonians, but not wanting them to touch the temple. Finally, towards the end of the 9th of Av is when they reached the temple and were able to ignite it. So they ignited the temple the 9th of Av, and it burned and burned and burned the whole night of the 9th and going into halfway through the 10th, which is why there were some very holy Jews that would actually fast the 9th and the 10th. And among our sages, question is the 9th or the 10th. The 10th is the bulk of when it burned, but the 9th is when it started. And they say the starting point is the worst moment, and that's why we fast on the 9th. That was the first temple. As I'm saying, some 490 years later, the second temple was also destroyed on the exact same day, because this is the day of that pain. But the 3 weeks comes from the first temple, when we had the breaching of the walls after a 3.5 year siege by the Babylonians. On the 17th of Tammuz, this year Thursday, we fast Thursday because of that. And 3 weeks later, on the 9th of Av, we have a very severe fast, much, much more severe than the 17th of Tammuz, really akin to the only other fast equivalent to it would be Yom Kippur, which is on the 9th of Av. And these 3 weeks are weeks of semi-mourning, are weeks when we restrict ourselves in various ways, and are weeks when we focus on love. Now, again, not to get confused, the 3 weeks really were created from the first temple, but the love factor is coming from the second temple. Again, the first temple, it was idolatry, adultery, and murder. But the second temple, which we are still experiencing the fallout from, came from that baseless hatred. But again, as I said, the Lubavitcher Rebbe said, no, we actually have finally rectified after 1900 years that baseless hatred, but we still have to continue with baseless love, not to rectify. We did rectify, but to live redemption, because living redemption is living with baseless love for everyone. Every single Jew should have that. You should have that same love for them as we have a love for ourselves. We don't always have to deserve why we love ourselves, but we love ourselves, hopefully. That's human. That's good. That's healthy. So to have that same love without needing to deserve it, without needing to earn it for every other Jew. So I thought, as I said, perhaps inspired by the double wedding I did yesterday, I thought that maybe it would be really nice to take the time to focus on baseless love for our spouse as another Jew that deserves baseless love.
I think we asked this question before. How can you practice baseless love to a Jew who stands for Palestine against Israel, like Sanders, like Schumer, and many others?
Those Jews I wouldn't give baseless love for.
Okay. That's the good answer. Okay.
Meaning there's a concept called the Erev Rav, the mixed multitude. These were the Egyptians or people from other nations that when the Jews were leaving Egypt, they said, "Oh, we want to be part of the winning team." And so they said to Moses, "Oh, we want to convert. We also want to be Jewish. We yeah, rah rah. We want it." And it says that Moses, without consulting God, said, "Oh, this is beautiful. That more people want to serve God is beautiful." So he said, "Sure." And these people were like the thorn in the side of the Jews for their 40 years in the desert. So then what happened to them? Like, where'd they go after that? I mean, we never see a point when they get killed out. Where'd they go? So it seems Kabbalistically, it's explained that they're still around. And as I understand it, any Jew throughout all of history who's a Jew-hating Jew, who's a Jew trying to harm other Jews, is a spiritual and physical descendant of this Erev Rav. Meaning, I believe, as I understand it, it's a combination. These are literally their physical descendants, but not every one of their physical descendants. You need both components. You need to be a physical descendant of the Erev Rav, of the mixed multitude, and you also need that same spiritual energy they had, which was really an energy to harm the Jewish people. And any Jew who is bent on harming Jews, as I understand it, is one of the Erev Rav. Unfortunately, I once saw a video that identified many such people. Thank God I don't really know who they're talking about, because that's not where I put my headspace. But any such person is Erev Rav, is mixed multitude, and therefore, no, none of the ways we look at another Jew, we look at such people. So as I said, we started this class by saying that I had the privilege of yesterday bringing two people to a chuppah, and I was so inspired, and it was such a beautiful experience. And of course, before a chuppah in Jewish life, you're going to mikvah, and that was also so meaningful. And how mikvah, which is such an amazing commandment, we're told actually retroactively heals children born without mikvah. And then chuppah, and it was really beautiful. So with all that in my mind, I assume, when I was thinking about the class today and preparing for the class, I thought the most appropriate baseless love we should talk about is love with us and our spouse. Now, of course, if someone's not married, you could take everything I'm saying and apply it, or not everything, but many things I'm saying, and apply it to other people in your life. But I am sure, inspired by yesterday, I was thinking of love between a spouse spouses, between a husband and a wife, between a wife and a husband. And starting with just a thought from the Rebbe on this, that the Rebbe, Lubavitcher Rebbe, and talking about his wife, the Rebbetzin, said about her, she was my pnimi. Pnimi means she was my inner force and my inner power, my inner energy. And I thought that was such a beautiful statement because in essence, that's really the relationship between a husband and a wife. We are, if they're aware or not, that inner force of our husband, meaning in the classical Kabbalistic dynamics of a husband and a wife, the wife is the recipient, the husband is the giver, so to speak, in a relationship. But the recipient needs to give the giver the ability to access that space, that energy, that mode of giving. So through us properly receiving, we can inspire our husbands to be proper givers. And obviously, we're very often the ones that work on marriage and invest in marriage, which is a wonderful thing to do. Really shows us how important we think it is. And it is, in the Song of Songs, it's speaking about the relationship between God and the Jewish people, but it's written in a parable. And the parable, if any of you have ever read Song of Songs, is the unbelievable love of a husband and a wife. And that unbelievable love of a husband and a wife is an expression, is a parable for the unbelievable love between God and the Jewish people. And this Song of Songs is called the Holy of Holies. It says all books of scriptures are holy, and Song of Song is the Holy of Holies, talking about the unbelievable love of husband and wife. So I'm bringing that in just to bring out the concept that in Jewish thought, loving a spouse, and perhaps more significantly, treating a spouse with love and treating a spouse as one that you love is considered really holy. It's really considered part of your service of God. And then we can look at ourselves and say, all right, well, what does it mean practically? And of course, it can be practically many things, but I'm saying because this is a class to have us utilize the energy of the 3 weeks, which is a class on loving, baseless love, undeserved love. What do we do to express this undeserved love for our spouse? And again, if you're not married, what do you do to express this undeserved love to other people you're in a relationship with? It might be parents, it might be siblings, it might be friends, it might be children, it might be colleagues. But what do you do to express this in a practical way? Well, one thing we're told for a woman to a man is praise. I mean, praise from a woman to a man or praise from a man to a woman. It's supposed to go in both directions. And we can praise our husbands for their wonderful physical qualities, their wonderful spiritual qualities. Maimonides says that a man needs respect and a woman needs to respect her husband. That's what a man needs. And a woman needs love and a man needs to love his wife. And when we gift our husbands with praise, this is really expressing that respect, just as perhaps when a husband gifts his wife with praise, he can use that as a vehicle to show his love. We could use this as a vehicle to show our respect. Our respect isn't always for what you see, because then it wouldn't be undeserved love. It could be deserved. You could praise and respect things that are in potential. That could be the focus of our praise. And, the beautiful classical example of this is Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva was one of the greatest sages the Jews ever had. From a certain perspective, we say all Torah comes from Rabbi Akiva. One of our greatest sages. When we have the redemption, sort of cool if you like to just think about things like this. We're going to have the Supreme Court. The Jewish Supreme Court was 71 elders. So at any given time when there was a Supreme Court, called in Hebrew the Sanhedrin, there were 71 elders, the 71 greatest holiest minds of Torah of that time. Now imagine by Mashiach, imagine by redemption. There's going to be a lot of contestants for that Supreme Court because there'll be the resurrection of the dead. And obviously, every great sage will come back right away. The holier you are, the faster you come back. So the holiest, most wise, most Torah embodied Jews of all times, they'll all be back in the beginning. So who's going to make it to the Supreme Court? You have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of the greatest sages of all times. Who is going to be on that Supreme Court? So I can't give you the roster of 70, 71, but I would assume Rabbi Akiva will be on as one of the greatest we ever had. Now, why am I bringing this out? This is a history class on Rabbi Akiva. Are we confused? No. I want to talk about women and their power. So, as some of you might know the story, how did Rabbi Akiva become Rabbi Akiva? Who was he? Well, who was he? Was a real commoner. He was the son of a convert. He was a shepherd. He had already been married. He had a child. He was 40 years old, and he was completely ignorant. He couldn't read the ABCs, which in Hebrew are the Aleph Bet. Couldn't read. He was a shepherd. He was ignorant, never was in school. So no family, no money, no pedigree, no Torah learning, nothing. A widower with a child, 40 years old, ignorant, a shepherd. And there was a Jewish woman who saw him. Her name was Rachel. In English, we say Rachel. She was the daughter, the only child of one of the richest Jews. There were the three wealthiest Jews of that time in Israel. So her father was one of those three. His name was Kalba Sabua. And he was one of the three wealthiest Jews of that time. And she was his only child. And her mother had already passed away. So here she is, the heiress, the only child of, again, one of the three wealthiest Jews of the entire country. And she was not only very wealthy, she was very, very holy. And when she sees this shepherd, who was just one of the many shepherds on her father's estates, tending her father's flock, and she saw his potential. She saw his great, great spiritual qualities. And she felt so bad because he has such potential. But he's just wasting himself. He's a shepherd. He should be studying Torah. He should be serving God, but he doesn't even know how. And honestly, he didn't have any motivation to do that. He was a shepherd. He was content. He was a holy, pure, simple Jew. And she said, no, he shouldn't be a simple Jew. He's a giant in terms of his spiritual qualities. So she did something that might not seem so modest, but I'm sure she did appropriately. She went over to him, and she was young then. She was, I don't know her age, but I imagine she was about 15. He was 40. She's the heiress. He's poor. He's a widower. He has a son. She knows Torah. He knows nothing. And she says, you know, you really should learn Torah. You have tremendous potential. And he's like, what are you talking about? I'm a simple shepherd. My father was a convert. I've got a son to support. Yeah, not for me, not this lifetime. And she said to him, she said, you know, if you would go and study Torah, I would marry you. He said, you would marry me. You shouldn't marry me. If you marry me, your father's going to disown you. You right now, you're the heiress to one of the largest fortunes in Israel. You're going to get the best husband. Every man in the country would want to marry you. You're young, you're beautiful, you have this fortune. Marry someone deserving of you. Good family, learned. She said, no, I want to marry you. I want you to go learn Torah. And he agreed. And they got married. And her father was furious. And he disowned her. And he said, it's okay. I want you to go learn Torah. And he goes off to learn Torah. And he's sitting with the children. And he doesn't know a thing. Nothing's penetrating his brain. He's a 40-year-old brain that's used to being out in the fields, not looking at a primer, an ABC primer. And it's not entering his head. And he's like, I don't know. I knew this was a bad deal. I knew Rachel was making a mistake. And he goes back to tell her, I'm really sorry. Let's get divorced. Go back home. Your father will accept you. He'll forgive you. You'll get a good husband. And then he sees this beautiful moment when he's sitting by a stream and he sees this rock that has this perfect hole bored in it. He's like, how did a rock get a hole? And he sees a drip, drip, drip of a fountain, the water hitting the rock until the water actually, over who knows how many hundreds of years, bored a hole in the rock. And he's like, wow, if water, which is so soft, can pierce through a rock, which is so hard, surely Torah, which is so strong, can pierce through my brain. So he went back to first grade or preschool, and he learned. And he learned, and he learned, and he learned, and he learned, and he learned for 24 years. And he became one of the greatest sages we've ever had. And all of his Torah, he says, it's not his Torah, it's his wife's Torah. All of his Torah, all of his students, he became the greatest teacher of Torah of that time. All the students of Torah were his students. He said, it's not my Torah, it's not your Torah, it's Rachel's Torah. Why? Because she saw his potential. And I think, and I'm sure many of you knew the story, so my apologies for taking so long saying it, but I want to really have you understand when I'm saying praise, it's Rachel style praise. It's seeing potential. Because praise could also sound like, well, if you deserve it, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about baseless love. Baseless love isn't if you deserve it. So it's the praise of potential. It's not nagging, critical praise. It's seeing the potential praise. And when we're in our real, godly, feminine space, we could express that potential in a way that's building and positive, not the opposite. You know, like we might all have a tendency to nag. And by the way, nagging is not only for husbands. We could be very great nags for our children also. And we could nag our husbands or our children or maybe other people in our life because we see potential. We're just saying that's what women can do. They can see potential. And we care and we love. That's why we bother to nag them. He could be healthier. He could achieve more. He could learn more. He could succeed more. He could be more religious. There's lots of good reasons why we nag people. But as we probably all learned, not with our husband and not with our kids, it doesn't really get us anywhere. But when we're grateful for the good we see in our husband or in our children or in the other people in our life, in the people that impact our life, and we're graceful and we smile and we listen and we focus on the other person's potential in a positive fashion to bring the other person to believe in him or herself the same way we do. Meaning, and I'm saying this 100% applies with your children. So if you're not married or if you're not related to this to your spouse, you might relate to this with your children or other people in your life. That like sometimes we could look at a child and, oh my gosh, we so see their potential. We so see what they should be and what they could be if only they ... And if we say that to them, generally we get nowhere. So it's this feminine gift of not only seeing potential, but of understanding how to convey that in a way that the other person, instead of feeling nagged and criticized, is going to believe in themselves the way you believe in them.
Sometimes, we're human and, we can, both sides, in whoever you're in a relationship with, whether it's a spouse or a family member or a close friend, we're human. And I notice like sometimes, we can flip the switch.
This is really supposed to be practical. And of course, I'm bringing out one point. There's many, many, many different points in terms of how we can show baseless love to someone else. As I'm saying, I'm thinking in terms of marriage, but as I'm talking about praise, I'm thinking of children, the people in our life. And I think, of course, a major technique is to always bring in our silent third partner. We all have a third silent partner, God. Especially, as I said, starting off with the idea of chuppah, of getting married, as God says, it really brings God into the marriage. And especially, of course, he's the partner with the husband and wife in every child. And I think the more we bring that third silent partner in, the more we can see those blessings flow. I actually remember, of course, during Rivka's chuppah, I remember doing Basia, doing Olga's chuppah. And I remember when that happened, how, those of you that remember, Basia, how by her chuppah, after her chuppah, her husband told me how he was so overwhelmed at that moment. His wife is sick and there's 2 girls he's taking care of and the home and the finances and her health and so much on him. And he felt so unbelievably burdened. And when he was standing under that chuppah, just there because his wife wanted and she was sick, so he was going along with it. He said, as my husband was saying the blessings under the chuppah, Alex said he felt God come in. And he felt it wasn't him and Olga alone. It was him, Olga, and God. And it was so beautiful to hear, so rare, so precious for a person who was totally not thinking about it and had no God thought, and yet really feeling God came in. And that's really true for every marriage and for all of our children. And I think sometimes when we're trying to say, wait, I want to help and I want to have this limitless, pure love, I want to do it right. And I see the potential, if it's in my husband, if it's in my children, if it's other people in my life, and I want to help them with love. I don't want to nag. I don't want to criticize. I want to build. And really pulling on God and saying, God, help. And maybe turning to God with charity, with psalms, with prayer, with extra commandments, with lighting the candles of the Shabbos, with adding in kosher, with doing things for God and saying, God, you're part of this marriage. God, this is your kid too, or in any other relationship. And I think that really, in a very practical way, can give us the ability to see how, for example, in this specific thing I was talking about, how we can convey to another person all of their beauty and potential, but not in a way that pulls them down and makes them feel criticized and smaller, but in a way that builds them up and makes them believe in it. All right. But that was just one example. Overarching concept, 3 weeks, trying to give love not only to the people like across the ocean, but give love to the people we deal with every single day. Thank you.